Ahmed Tabaqchali. He's the Chief Investment Officer at Asia Frontier Capital Iraq Fund and joins us now from London. Mr. Tabaqchali, thank you very much for being with us. So just take us through some of the challenges facing the Iraqi economy.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'm glad to be with you today. Yes, I think you've touched on a few things that affect Iraq greatly. Basically, you're talking Iraq is as all oil producers, and particular as one country that depends extensively on oil, far more than any other country that exports oil. The negative developments has hurt Iraq significantly over the last year. However, a lot of the damage done to Iraq is pretty much mostly its history, in the sense that we ended the year with probably one of the worst crises in the oil markets. But nevertheless, even in a year like that, Iraq sort of made something like $41 billion in oil sales. This year, we're likely to make something like $52 billion in oil sales. So it looks better. The issue that Iraq has, and that's where it's the heart of its problems, is that it has considerable revenues, decent and considerable revenues. It has decent and foreign reserves. The issue Iraq has is that its expenditures are far higher than its income. Even in this year, like in the following year, I mean, last year or 2020, we probably the payment for salaries and pensions, which is one of the largest items in the budget, pretty much was more than oil income. This year, even with oil prices recovering somewhat, we're assuming $42 for Iraqi oil. Even at that level, it will eat up all its revenues. And that's really where the challenges are for Iraq. You mentioned and you went on the currency, and I think that's a very important thing. It definitely affected Iraq in a negative way because Iraq has got local industry and local agriculture, but it's fairly small. It has structural issues when it comes to its own, private sector development and long-term structural issues, which probably don't have time to go into them, but they are a function of a pretty much, in a sense, a state-driven economy. What's been hurting it over the last few years is that Iraq's two largest import markets, basically Turkey and Iran, their currencies, as you know, have declined by about something like, in the case of the Turkish lira, by 60% over the last 5 years, and by over 80% for the Iranian toman. Now, for Iraq, small sector, agricultural as well as industrial sector, has to cope significantly against sanctions. So the revaluation of the dinar, even though it can hurt us short term because of our high dependence on imports, but it will provide some sort of support, some sort of lifeline for our local industry. Because in addition to structural issues that you can't compete against, you don't need to be slammed by competitors, better economies as well as weaker currencies versus your own.
Mr. Tabaqchali, sorry, just because we don't have very much time, I do want to get another question to you. With an economy that is so dependent on oil, are there moves within Iraq to try and diversify away from oil, diversify away from fossil fuels, and perhaps try and raise revenue in other ways?
Absolutely, there are, and you'll see those in the budget. However, to be realistic, in the case of Iraq, oil revenues would still predominate. I mean, this year we're likely to have our non-oil revenues, the plans in the budget, most of them are reasonably realistic. And so therefore we could grow our non-oil revenues from something like $7 billion to something like maybe like $14 billion. But as you can see, it's a small amount that'll take us a long time to develop our local industry in order to tax it, in order to diversify. So oil will still remain a significant part of Iraq's income. And hopefully the plan that we have, or the government has, or future government will have, is that they will lessen that. But it's a long-term process. So therefore, for Iraq, we still will be buffeted by any changes in oil prices.
Okay. Ahmed Tabaqchali from AFC Iraq Fund, thank you very much for your time.